The game's gotten too greedy. That's what a lot of fans say, don't they? And when you look at all that's happened over the past decade or so, it's quite hard to ignore the dark truth that the game that you thought you love is actually a massive lie. I mean, just look at everything. There's the European Super League, various financial fair play disputes, the FIFA World Cup scandal, the Greek football scandal, the Italian max fixing scandal, football fraud in Belgium scandal, oligarchs buying up every club in existence, emerging leagues buying up every player in existence, players' wages becoming the GDP of a developing country, Sam Allardyce. It's safe to say that everything's gone a little bit nuts. Take me back to the good old days, when football was simple. It was a game for the working class, it was our game. But was football actually better back then? I mean, disregard the hooliganism and the child sexual abuse cases and the racism that continues to this day. Was it at least simpler, less scandalous, less greedy? In this video, we'll be looking at a controversial episode in English football that would reshape the top flight and still have ripples felt to this day. No, it's not the formation of the Premier League, but the 1915 match-fixing scandal and subsequent expansion of the Football League in 1919. The structure of the Football League system at the beginning of the 1910s was not too dissimilar to what we have now, if just a little bit more condensed. The Football League consisted of just 2 leagues rather than the 4 that we have today, the very easy to remember Division 1 and Division 2, and below that a number of regional leagues throughout the country. Both Division 1 and Division 2 consisted of 20 teams, while promotion relegation had become simple enough. The bottom 2 teams of Division 1 would be relegated to Division 2, and the top 2 clubs of Division 2 would move up to the top tier. Weirdly, promotion and relegation to and from the second division was less clear. Instead of this being automated, the bottom 3 teams would have to seek what was called re-election, a process whereby the rest of the teams in the league would vote to decide if their mates could stay in the league for the following season, while also considering the applications of ambitious non-football league clubs. Typically, the bottom 3 teams would end up staying in the division, creating a closed-door system that sounds eerily similar to a certain European enterprise. To make things even more complicated, non-league teams were allowed to apply to the league basically regardless of the previous season's performance. Take for instance in 1908. Grimsby Town, Chesterfield Town and Lincoln City finished bottom of the Division 2 and went up for re-election against Bradford Park Avenue, Tottenham Hotspur and Burton. Grimsby and Chesterfield were re-elected, while Lincoln City were binned off in favour of Bradford, who had finished 13th in the Southern League. To further complicate matters, Stoke later resigned from Division 2 due to financial problems, so rather than Lincoln being automatically reinstated, another vote was called between Lincoln and Tottenham, which Spurs won by a single vote. This will be important context later. Kind of. But for the meantime, all you need to keep in mind is that in Division 1, 2 teams go up, 2 teams go down. Oh, and it's 2 points for a win and a point for a draw these days because reasons. Flash forward to the 1914-1915 season. As war erupted around Europe, the Football League decided that following the conclusion of the 38-game season that the league would be suspended. You know, because of all the death and such. At the end of the season, the league would look like this, with Everton as champions, finishing a point ahead of Oldham Athletic, while at the bottom of the table, Chelsea and Tottenham found themselves in the relegation places. Had these been ordinary times, Chelsea and Tottenham would have been relegated from Division 1 and replaced with Derby County and Preston North End, who finished first and second in the second division. However, these were not ordinary times. Firstly, because of war, and secondly, because of a juicy scandal that was emerging. On April 2nd, 1915, with 8 games to go of the league campaign, relegation-threatened Manchester United would play Liverpool at Old Trafford. In the days leading up to the match, meetings had occurred between players of both sides at pubs in Manchester. The players met to discuss fixing the game after being approached by a dodgy third party, presumably a shady-looking character wearing a trench coat and one of those comedy glasses things. The arranged result would be a 2-0 win for Manchester United, mainly because odds of the result were as high as 8-1. In the end, 7 players decided to agree to the plan and swiftly jogged down to the nearest Paddy Power. So why would these 7 men agree to such a shameful act? Well, there are 3 reasons actually. Reason number 1, money. With the feeling that this could be the last league season for quite some time, due to the war, many of the players thought that this opportunity to fix a match would simply be too good to ignore. Reason number 2, money. With attendances dwindling around most of the grounds, due to the war, football club revenue around the country was down. Way down. Much like during the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the players had agreed to take a pay cut in order to protect their club from financial peril. So some of the players saw this as an opportunity to recoup some of that lost cash. Reason number 3, money. Simply put, they thought they could get away with it. With attentions firmly elsewhere, because of the war, many of the players thought that the appropriate authorities would not be paying sufficient attention at the time run-of-the-mill league match. The game played out, rather unsurprisingly, to a 2-0 win for Manchester United. The match referee and some supporters noted Liverpool's lack of commitment during the game. They had missed a penalty that had been awarded to them, and when Fred Pagnam hit the Manchester United crossbar, that's a fucking name, Fred Pagnam. And when Fred Pagnam hit the Manchester United crossbar late in the match, his teammates publicly remonstrated with him. In its match report, the Manchester Daily Dispatch wrote of the game at Old Trafford. The second half was crammed with lifeless football. United were 2 up with 22 minutes to play, and they seemed so content with their lead that they apparently never tried to increase it. Liverpool scarcely ever gave the impression that they'd be likely to score. Alarm bells soon started ringing due to the amount of money that had been lumped onto a 2-0 result at bookmakers. With increasing media and public scrutiny, the FA launched an investigation into the match that would last until the end of 1915, well after the season had concluded. Some players knew about the scheme and had refused to take part. Fred Pagnam, him again, had threatened to score a goal to ruin the result, hence his shot against the crossbar. He later testified against his teammates at the FA hearing, like the grass he was. At the same hearing, United player Billy No Mates Meredith said no one had talked to him about the plan, but said that he'd become suspicious when none of his teammates would pass to him. On December 27, 1915, after the conclusion of their investigation, all 7 players were banned from playing football for life by the FA. You can sympathise with the 7 men. After all, there was a war going on, and with the future looking bleak across all fronts, they were only looking out to provide for themselves and their families. The match-fixing scandal at the time must have seemed like a tiny silver lining amongst a thunderstorm of shit. Sadly, one of the 7 players banned, Sandy Turnbull, was killed serving in the war. All the players would eventually have their bans lifted by the FA, 5 of them plus Sandy Turnbull posthumously in 1919, while Enoch West had to wait until 1945 before his ban was lifted. At that point he was 59 years old, so probably a little bit past it. The question now was, well, what about Chelsea? Even though the lads were in it for the cash, the 2 points earned from the fixed result had secured Manchester United's safety by the end of the season. So even though it was the players and not the club that had fixed the match, Manchester United still profited. Seeing as no football was going to be played anytime soon, because of the war, nothing was sorted and the whole situation was left in Football League purgatory, the footballing equivalent of putting off that really important thing that you've been meaning to do for days, but you don't because you can't be fucked. Flash forward to 1919, with the war finally at an end, the Football League had to do something about that washing up that they left in the sink for the past 4 years. There were a number of proposals about how the league should go about cleaning up the mess. Everton suggested that Chelsea should stay in the division and Manchester United should face the drop. This was rejected as it was the players of Manchester United that had fixed the game and not the officials of the club. West Brom proposed that the first division should be expanded to 21 teams, and Chelsea could take the extra spot. But this was rejected as well, as who the hell wants an odd number of teams in their league? Utter nonsense. The only logical option was put forward by Blackpool, suggesting that both leagues should be expanded to 22 teams, with Chelsea taking up one of the 2 new slots in the first division, with the other team being decided by vote. 7 teams applied for the final place. Tottenham, who had finished bottom of Division 1 in the final season before the war, Barnsley, Wolves, Birmingham, Arsenal and Hull, who had finished 3rd to 7th in the second division, and bizarrely Nottingham Forest, who despite finishing 18th in Division 2, thought that they'd tried their luck, because you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take and all that. Clubs set about building support for their application in the build-up to the vote, which was due to take place on March 10th. Tottenham built their claim on the back of precedent, seeing as the last 2 times that the league expanded, the bottom 2 clubs had been able to keep their place in the league. Arsenal's request was based on their heritage as the first Southern club to play in the Football League, and their surge in support since moving to Highbury. Nottingham Forest's plea was presumably vote for us for the lols. After much debate, March 10th finally rolled around for the Football League to decide upon the final team entering the First Division for the 1919-1920 season. The logical choice today would have been either to keep Tottenham in the league or promote third place in Division 2, Burnley. However, as we've already discussed, this was a far from straightforward process. When the votes were tallied up, it was Arsenal who were the runaway winners, receiving more than double the amount of votes than second place Tottenham Hotspur. So, what happened? Just what made Arsenal such a compelling choice ahead of everyone else? Well, there's probably a few reasons. Reason number 1, the media. To begin with, Arsenal were held in high regard at the time, particularly in the sports press. The influential Athletics News, a Manchester-based newspaper, endorsed Arsenal in the run-up to the Football League meeting, citing that Arsenal were the pioneers of professionalism in the South, while also arguing that Arsenal were very unfortunate to miss out on promotion at the end of the 1913-1914 season, and that Arsenal's long-standing relationship with the Football League should also be considered. The Athletic News wasn't so hot on Tottenham Hotspur, to tell the truth. They argued that Tottenham's claim that it was precedent for 2 relegated clubs to remain in the league didn't apply to the set of circumstances that the Football League found itself in. Furthermore, they said it's only fair that Chelsea were allowed to stay in the division, as they did not get themselves relegated, while Tottenham did. Ouch. The Athletic News also pointed out that Tottenham blamed their poor performance in the 1914-1915 season on the enlistment of some of their squad to the army, but called bullshit on that as other clubs were in the same position. It would be fair to say that many of the clubs voting would have been swayed by the positivity towards Arsenal in the media, and not wanting to seem out of touch, voted for them accordingly. A bit like a politician saying their favourite artist is Taylor Swift, but not being able to name a single one of her songs. Reason number 2, Henry Norris. By the end of the First World War, Arsenal chairman Henry Norris was an incredibly influential person, and not only in English football. As well as being chairman of Arsenal and the man who orchestrated Arsenal's move to Highbury, he was also a member of Parliament, and his contribution to the war effort had him climb to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, while he was knighted for forming the Footballers' Battalion, the first football battalion composed of amateur and professional players, referees and officials. Just to add to this, he was well in with the Church of England. Apparently the Archbishop of Canterbury was a mate, and the Freemasons as well, rising to become something called the Grand Deacon of the United Grand Lodge of England, which sounds perfectly fine and not batshit crazy at all. Suffice to say, someone as well connected as Sir Hank could probably call in a few favours to swing a few votes Arsenal's way. He also held the cards in some way, as he had previously raised the issue of match fixing before the 1915 scandal happened, but had been told to keep stum about it by the Football League and FA. Reason number 3. Corruption! Maybe. Full disclosure before this part, I am an Arsenal fan, so while I am attempting to be as neutral and unbiased as possible during this subject, I did write this section after 3 pints, so who knows what I've gone and writted. In the years following the 1919 vote, allegations grew that foul play was at hand, and that the decision to have Arsenal play in the First Division were financially motivated and not based on merit, with Henry Norris at the centre of it all. It's been said that in the lead up to the vote, Sir Nobby bribed a number of representatives to sway things in Arsenal's favour. Arsenal's manager at the time, Leslie Neaton, wrote in his 1948 book, Behind the Scenes in Big Football, that Norris had a few financiers here and there, while former footballer/journalist Bernard Joy further pushed this narrative in his 1952 book, Forward Arsenal. It's also been said that the then president of the Football League, John McKenna, gave an impassioned speech to the rest of the Football League endorsing Arsenal's claim, in exchange for a house in Wimbledon, courtesy of, you've guessed it, Henry Norris. Furthermore, it was alleged that Norris had threatened to specifically expose the match fixing which had been rife in the seasons beforehand to the press, thus blackmailing the Football League into guaranteeing Arsenal a spot in the top flight. So, how much of this is true? Well, we don't know. None of these claims have ever been proven, and there's never been any first-hand evidence provided to substantiate them. Take, for instance, John McKenna's impassioned speech to the Football League. Well, there's little evidence that he ever said it. Not one newspaper or journal from the time reported such a speech supporting Arsenal happening. You would have thought that if there were any whiffs of corruption at the time, someone would have said something. But no one did. No media speculation, no FA investigation. Even the Tottenham representative at the meeting stated, "We shall take our defeat like sportsmen," which I assume meant with honour and not diving to the floor and holding his ankle for 10 minutes. This isn't to say Norris was a totally uncorrupt character. In 1927, he was banned from football for life for illegal payments made over an 8-year period. And while none of these were directly linked to the 1919 vote, it certainly shows that it wouldn't have been outside of Norris's character. Truth is, the only people who know the truth are Norris and the other representatives from the 1919 vote. So we'll probably never know what really happened, on account of them being dead. All of this was fairly inconsequential anyway. The following season, Arsenal competed in Division 1, finishing a respectable 10th place. Meanwhile, Tottenham dominated Division 2, winning the league and gaining promotion to the top flight once again, to be reunited with their old chums from down the road, Arsenal. So, what have we learned? Well, while football today certainly has its controversies, scandals, questionable characters, to be fair, it always has. Yes, its roots are the game for the working class, but for the sport to grow it needed structure, bureaucracy, governance. And while all of this is done for the good of the game, they also make the game less transparent, drawing a frosted shower curtain of mystery around the once rubber duck-filled hot bath of football. Can you have one without the other? Probably not. Do I need to work on my metaphors? Almost certainly. So what do you think? Were Tottenham and other teams just on the unfortunate side of media opinion and some clever backstage politics from Henry Norris? Was Sir Nobby conducting dodgy cash in envelope deals behind everyone's back to secure his team's future? Well, let me know in the comments.